Have an overflow room, and that is located in
1050 and 1070.
1050 and 1070 if we run out of seats. I'm also joined here by Councilmember Koretz. What I think I will do first, for the purposes of time and to let the consultants speak for as long as possible, is let me invite Mr. Stephen Twining up for public comment. Then we will go through the comment cards on item 1, and then let the consultants do the presentation.
Good morning, council persons. My name is Steve Twining. I live at 1535 Roscommere. First of all, on the ratepayers advocate, can you discuss that at all?
This is public comment, and
That's not on the agenda.
yeah, so you're free to say whatever you want during public comment. Public comment is not normally the venue where we have discussion back and forth, but I can assure you that it will be back on the agenda. And to just give you a very short update, because it's not on the agenda, the chief legislative analyst is working on language for the ballot.
Okay. As far as the electric rates, this is the rape of the middle class. Single-family homeowner is getting it in the shorts. All of my friends are complaining about their current bills, much less the increases that are anticipated. One can benefit as an owner of a stock in public companies and get dividends or potential price increases, but not as owners of the DWP. Tiered rates, the electricity, my bill went up 25% in the same usage in between the last two bills, and that's because of the tiered rates. The base rates in 2008 were 107 per 100 kilowatt hours. I refer you to Power Financial Plan summary recommended, and the forecast for the year 2014 is 177. So that's a good 70% increase, not just 28 as the LA Times said today. I've had solar panels in my house for the last 7 years, and it's been a good thing, but not adequate. Anyhow, there's going to be a revolution over power rates and the budget of the city of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't have any other, one more, I guess I do. All right. And we've been joined by Mr. Krikorian. Dr. Williams for public comment.
Public comment regarding DWP. Basically, where's the strategic plan? Over a year ago, there was a workshop held all day. Several of us attended. Another workshop was done, and we all attended. However, nothing else has come from it. How can you go forward for especially the next 4 or 5 years or up till the 2020 without a strategic plan for one of the largest, if not the largest, departments within the city? Even the library has a strategic plan. So what is the problem regarding the strategic plan? Maybe it sets limits. Maybe it shows where we're going, because one of the things in the background, even the item 1, is the long term. I really don't care about the solar so much or the turbines so much, but when you start affecting the coal-fired power plants, then that's a major issue, because reliability, the amount of backup power that you have to have if you go to anything other than coal is substantial. And without a plan, how do we know what's going to happen? And that's one of the things. Have them finish their strategic plan before we have any major rate increases. You know, maybe a ratepayers advocate would help. Maybe it wouldn't. I don't know. After reading the PA consultant report, I don't think that being on the inside necessarily makes it more visible. Have them be more visible, more transparent, and give us a plan of what everything is going to do up till the year 2020, or at least through the coal conversion. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Williams, thank you. Why don't you stay up here, because you filled out a card for number 1 also. Okay. Do we have any other cards for public comment? Any other, all right. Public comment is the period during the meeting to come up and comment on items that are not on the agenda. So if there's anybody else who wants to comment during public comment, this is the time to come forward. Otherwise, I'll close public comment and we'll go into the cards for item 1. I'm going to call a number of you up for item 1. You can come and make your comments now, and then we'll ask the Chief Legislative Analyst representative to make some comments on the record. Then we will go directly into the consultant's report. Dr. Williams will be our first speaker, and then is Monique Lopez here? Come on up, Monique. With Evan Gillespie. Come on up
We only
and have a seat.
one microphone.
Okay, they're gonna go one at a time, so. And,
I got it.
okay, great. Chrissy Scarborough. Is Chrissy
Stepped out.
stepped out?
Yeah.
Okay, she's gonna come back?
Hope so.
Okay, all right, let's start with you guys. All right, Dr. Williams.
Okay, Dr. Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno, Northeast LA. Again, strategic. In the document that we have going to be presented, they use strategic everywhere. Strategic this, strategic goals, programs, issues, strategic planning. Oh, and they also say strategic plan. But we have no strategic plan. Where is it? Has it been adopted by the Board of Water and Power Commissioners? I don't think so. But then let's go back to the main part of the title, ECAF. Remember that ECAF says factor, only one. However, over the last couple of years, many things have been blended into the ECAF, so that it is no longer, you might say, for natural gas, but it also includes this and includes that and all sorts of things. Why? In order to avoid having a rate increase having to be officially approved by the board and then by the city council's either concurrence or approval. So all ECAF is doing is avoiding having to make an up or down decision vote as to, yes, we want a rate increase, no, we don't want a rate increase. It's kind of a stealth factor. And now it's being used to, oh, well, since we have to buy power on the outside, maybe we'll have to include that under ECAF because we don't know how much it's going to cost. Don't we plan ahead? Power purchase agreements are fairly standard. You can do it yourself. So ECAF, as it is right now, should just be for fuel and coal. And the PA report says, what happens if the coal-fired power plant stops?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Monique Lopez and then Evan Gillespie.
Sure, thank you so much. Monique Lopez with the Coalition for Clean Air. The PA report highlighted some of the hidden costs of fossil fuels. The hidden cost of coal and natural gas has resulted in the situation that the DWP finds itself in, now having to raise rates in order to make up for the undercollection of funds for fossil fuels. The ECAF doesn't, or the report doesn't even touch on the issues of carbon regulation, not to mention the many impacts of pollution and global warming. The costly fossil fuels that got us into this mess needs to be replaced by renewables and long-term benefits they offer. In saying so, we need an investment plan which will bring about transparency and accountability, an infrastructure investment plan for renewable energy can and should identify strategic options in terms of resource mixes and resource locations, infrastructure needs, challenges, and a contingency plan. The DWP needs to fund an ongoing audit work by the city controller. An accountability plan should include the auditing of renewable energy investments in order to ensure that renewable energy investment is properly budgeted for and that funds are being spent are done so in an efficient manner. Moreover, it should include regular auditing of power expenditures, which compare to actual expenses, to the investment plan, and to the assumed budgeted costs of fossil fuels. Dirty and dangerous fossil fuels like coal are responsible for a huge portion of the energy cost adjustment factor the DWP is being forced to increase. by increasing our investment in renewables and weaning off dirty and dangerous fossil fuels in an accountable manner that includes a comprehensive infrastructure investment plan for renewable energy and frequent audits will save the DWP customers money in the long term.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Evan Gillespie.
Great, thank you. Evan Gillespie, I'm a field organizer with the Sierra Club. Excited and interested to see the report today. The club is pleased that an independent third-party sources made recommendations that will help the city of Los Angeles achieve one of the most important environmental accomplishments in the nation, permanently breaking our coal habit. LA gets a disappointingly high 44% of its power from coal-fired power plants that are located outside of the state in Arizona and Utah. They're among the worst stationary sources of pollution in the United States. Coal-fired power plants are poisoning the people that live near them by polluting their air and water. And pollution from coal-fired power plants is also a major contributor to catastrophic climate change, which causes problems, including wildfires and drought, that directly affect families in Los Angeles. The report provides clarity about, for LADWP, City Council, and ratepayers in Los Angeles about the costly outcomes of postponing this critical transition away from coal-fired power. Federal efforts to limit the amount of pollution from coal-fired power plants will undeniably increase the cost of coal going forward. By making upfront investments recommended by the report, LADWP could save ratepayers drastic cost increases in the future. Delaying the transition away from coal, chaining the city to business as usual will continue to send our ratepayer money out of California at a time when LA desperately needs it to be investing money in energy efficiency and renewable sources of energy that will create local jobs to stimulate the economy here in Los Angeles. Investing in renewable energy provides both near-term and long-term benefits for Los Angeles, and the PA Consulting report demonstrates the consequences of delaying these necessary investments. It's unconscionable that Los Angeles would continue to export dangerous pollution, send our money out of state to coal plants when we have bountiful renewable energy sources here in Southern California. Sierra Club's Looking Beyond Coal campaign is pleased to see this positive progress and is looking forward to working with LADWP and members of City Council to help pull the plug on dirty coal.
Thank you. Mr. Cardenas would like to ask a
I
question.
apologize.
Sure.
What organization did you say you're from?
Sierra Club.
Sierra Club. Does the Sierra Club have an opinion about the day-to-day cost to the customer?
Just in regards to ECAF or in regard to?
Yes, if we were to move to cleaner energy, et cetera, is there a cost factor? And do they have an opinion, or have they taken a vote or had a discussion on how that cost factor is going to affect our lower income residents, et cetera, on a day-to-day basis?
Absolutely. It's our opinion that, first of all, catastrophic climate change impacts.
No, excuse me, I already heard that, and I get it, and I agree with you on that, just so you understand.
Yeah.
However, we do have customers who pay on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
Every 2 months they get a bill. Mm-hmm. Those are the ratepayers, happen to be the owners of the Department of Water and Power as well. Mm-hmm. But my question is, what is, if any, is there an opinion that you can articulate that your organization has, Sierra Club has, on that fact?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I apologize for misunderstanding the question. It's our opinion that investments in renewable energy and transitioning away from coal will help protect ratepayers, not necessarily in the next 6 months or on their next bill, but certainly in the next 4 to 5 years as carbon regulation comes into place and as the cost of doing business for our coal plants increases dramatically. So we see this as a way to actually insulate ratepayers from cost increases in the future.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thanks. I'm going to call up the next group of speakers. Steve Twining, Chuck Roy, Donald Lowe's, and Sissy Scarborough. Why don't you come back up? Steve.
Yes, hi, Steve Twining here. I would like to refer you to page 17 of their report. The three of us here attended a session last Friday afternoon. And on page 17, it makes reference to Tier 2 of being 14.1 cent, I guess, per hour, and it compares Southern California Edison, Pacific Gas Electric, and San Diego Gas Electric. You're now getting to the point, and when you get the increases, the 2.7 ECAF that's proposed eventually, you're going to be well in excess of the Tier 2 initial stage that is listed on page 17. I would like to commend the council and this body for hiring PA Consulting to do this study, an independent outside group that took a different position on Measure B. And I think that their study is commendable. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Roy?
Ray. I'm Chuck Ray from
Sorry.
Council District 11.
Can't read it.
By my handwriting, I'm sorry. And I'm the vice chair of the Neighborhood Council's Oversight Committee for the MOU with the Department of Water and Power. I am not speaking on their behalf, however, nor am I speaking on behalf of my local council, mainly because we haven't had the time to form an opinion with either of these groups. The report came out late February. Things are moving very, very fast, and the way the councils work, it might take as much as 3 months before you get opinions from neighborhood councils. But I look at this report as being an excellent way, insight into the Department of Water and Power that we haven't had before, and I commend the council and the generators of the report. But I'd like to offer a formula for your thinking, which is that we have some crisis elements that are brought out in that report about bond rating possibilities going down, and I would suggest that you better cover those fast. So if you want to go ahead and push forward that portion of the recommendations at the end of the report, as a personal opinion, I would say that should be done to protect the ratepayers from having to pay interest that does them no good, but not the whole package. Give us time to think about the whole package so that we can get a clearly articulated plan for the renewable energy portion, particularly one that has substantial city-owned facilities and in-basin facilities, and where there's open bidding, not something that's exclusive to one entity that does the work. I'm losing time, so I'll just pass on to someone
Okay,
else.
thank you. Mr. Lowe's?
Donald Lowe's. I live at 2037 Benedict Canyon Drive. There are a lot of sophisticated things that you've heard today. I think I'm really addressing what the councilman had to say a moment ago, which is just simply as you go through all this, I hope you will consider how this impacts somebody's pocketbook as we work through all of this. I've been trying to answer questions at my breakfast table as what this means and the end of the bill at the end of the month, which we can't read anyway. But if you take a look at it, and whatever this point, whatever it is going to be addressed, if you just think about it, multiply it times 12, and try and back it into your own budget or budget planning in some kind of way, you'll know the confusion that all of us have out there. And even if we're only addressing the ECAF, which I barely understand, certainly those things that are, a lot of the things that are included and that are increased by multiples by the back end of the bill are not things that we can readily anticipate, nor should we have to. So I hope you can think about that in pocketbook terms as you're going through all the sophisticated commentary that you're going to review and have presented. Thank you.
Chrissy Scarborough?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Hold on a second. Can you move the microphone over
Yes,
to you?
slide it over.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Chrissy Scarborough, and I work for the Sierra Club as a conservation organizer for the Beyond Coal campaign. And I just want to make a few comments. So every day, the city powers itself by burning 12,000 tons of coal, releasing toxic mercury, arsenic, lead, nitrous oxide, and sulfur dioxide into the air. We export our jobs, money, and pollution to out-of-state coal plants, and this rate increase shows that unless the city shows true leadership, we'll simply continue with the status quo, buying dirty coal, polluting Navajo and Hopi land where our coal is mined and burned, and using over 18 billion gallons of water a year to cool these two coal plants. If we claim to want to be green, well, let's show leadership. This report clearly shows that 2/3 of the ECAF proposal is going towards coal and natural gas. We really need to protect ratepayers by making sure that we make the investments to renewable energy that will protect ratepayers in the future. I actually helped coordinate the organizing side of our campaign, and I actually have a letter here for you from USC. It was directed to the mayor, and in this letter from the president of USC, after students organized on the campus,
gathering over 1,000 students' petitions, signatures, over one semester, USC sends a letter to the mayor saying that USC, the largest, Los Angeles Department of Water's largest private consumer of energy. It's important, therefore, that we be in the vanguard of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We support fully your bold initiatives to move the city beyond coal consumption by 2020. I have a copy for each of you from the president of USC. So I'd like to make it clear that the consequences of climate change will affect the most vulnerable here in Los Angeles. Those people who can least afford an increase in their rates will be forced year after year to pay the price of coal-fired energy with increased temperatures, fires, and drought, not to mention paying for the volatility of the fossil fuels market. I've heard a lot about people not wanting to let their rates go up, but I want to make it clear that our rates are already going up. Okay.
Thank you.
It's all right. Thank you.
That's okay. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming in on time. We have two more speakers, Tony Wilkinson and Jack Humphreysville. And I believe that's it for the public comment cards? Okay, great. Mr. Humphreysville, you want to come up?
Hi, I'm Tony Wilkinson. I'm from Panorama City Neighborhood Council and also the chair of the Neighborhood Council Department of Water and Power Memorandum of Understanding Oversight Committee. I am coming just to express a little frustration here. I want to hear what you folks on the council have to say about this report, but the mayor's press release, while good-hearted, is somehow muddied the water of this issue. I'd like to clarify at least how I see it. The Board of Water and Power Commissioners had proposed uncapping the ECAF without adequate notice for neighborhood councils to discuss it. We came and we protested and said this is basically giving a blank check for an uncosted, unknown amount of renewable production. You on the city council said, wait a minute, we want to know too. We thank you very much for asking PA Consulting to come up with this report. This report now says that there are expenses that have already been incurred which need to be covered, or the utility will have its bond rating threatened. If it goes down, we as ratepayers will pay $70 or $80 million that won't go anywhere to green coal or to jobs. So I am concerned that maybe we want to take a look at the 0.8 cents, which has nothing to do with someone else's proposal, the 0.8 cents that is immediately needed to cover our credit issues. And then everything else, take a look at perhaps July 1st, which will give the 90 days necessary under the MOU for full public discussion, and will also force the Department of Water and Power to come back and actually cost the amount of the renewables, which then can be removed from the ECAF and put in a special fund so we know exactly what we're dealing with, at which point the renewables fuel only could be uncapped. So I would like to just express some frustration as well as some thanks for what you guys have done.
Thank you very much. Mr. Humphreysville.
I would like to thank you guys for authorizing the independent fiscal review, which I thought was nothing short of excellent. It was very revealing, in some ways not so complimentary, but it was an excellent report, and it's given clarity to what's going on at the DWP more than anything else we've ever had, other than maybe the IEA survey that they did. I'd like to reiterate Dr. Williams' call for the strategic plan as well as the integrated resources plan. You can't just go out there and spend billions and billions of dollars without knowing where the hell you're going. It's almost as simple as that. I would also like to see what the impact is going to be through 2020 of 2020 of the 40% renewables and the no coal by 2020. Though that is real money that we're talking about here. I would also like to say, as a final comment, is what's going on at DWP now is not, we don't need a neutral ratepayers advocate. We need an independent ratepayers advocate that's going to work to increase the transparency of DWP, to review and analyze their operations, their finances, and management on a timely basis, and help the ratepayers as well as the city council understand what's going on at DWP in a more timely fashion. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have one more card from Alexandra Kravitz.
Yes, thank you. I'm speaking only for myself, and I was just wanting to address Councilmember Cardenas' question as to whether the price of carbon would really impact ratepayers. And I believe it is in a PA report that there's a scenario at $40 a ton. By 2014, I believe it would be a $750 million liability for the department, which will impact ratepayers. But it should you should ask them because they know better than me. But I just wanted to bring that up. There will be a ratepayer impact when carbon gets priced. Thank you.
Thank you. That closes the public comment portion on item number 1. And before we move into the presentation by the consultants, I believe the Chief Legislative Analyst, Rafael Pareto, would like to make a few comments just to set the stage for the presentation.
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Rafael Pareto with the CLA's office. Just by order of background, what we'd like to state is that how we got here, and primarily the council had instructed our office, including the CAO, to hire a firm to do a full review of the ECAF as well as the rate design proposals that have been offered put forth by the board, Water and Power Board, last August. So since that time, in November, we hired PA Consulting, and they've done an exhaustive review and released their report. We released a report on February 25th, and now they're here today to simply provide their review, their findings and recommendations as to where the ECAF, the issues that relate to the ECAF, as well as the rate design proposals. So that's with that.
If you would, PA Consultants, if you'd come forward, and I believe this will also be on the flat screen. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just lift it up. Is it on?
Yeah, I think it has to be. You're operating it from the laptop there?
No, it's operated for me.
Okay, there,
Yeah.
you are. Okay,
Okay.
great. Okay, tell us where we're starting. Okay, go ahead. Please. And
Thank
say
you.
your name for the record, too, so we know who.
I'm Andrew Ray with PA Consulting. I led the effort to do the ECAF report on behalf of the CLA and the CAO's office. And these are some of my colleagues who were directly involved in the report, so they're here so that we can answer any questions you have in as much depth as you
Why don't you put all
like.
their names on the record so we know who's who?
My name is Jonathan Jacobs.
Charles Tooman.
And Mark Hagan.
So I'll make a few very brief opening remarks, and then we could walk through key points or...
Let's do that.
Okay.
Give a framework to this discussion so that it doesn't go off in a 50 million directions. So I think this is really important and complicated material to dissect.
Okay. PA Consulting has completed our independent review of the Department of Water and Power's proposed changes to the energy cost adjustment factor in residential rates. Just as a brief reminder, the department proposed in August of last year that due to rising costs, the existing cap on the quarterly ECAF changes needed to be raised from 0.1 cent per kilowatt hour each quarter to 2 cents per kilowatt hour each quarter. The department also proposed that along with this increased cap in ECAF, residential base rates would be restructured to lessen the impact of an ECAF increase on Tier 1 or the lowest usage customers. Our report, which was issued by the CAO and CLA office on February 25th, I think addresses all of the questions that were in the RFP and provides the full description of the ECAF. We based our analysis on the department's current 5-year financial plan, verifying the calculations and assumptions made for each ECAF component. This plan assumes that the department reaches a 20% level of renewable energy in 2010 and maintains it for the next 5 years ending in 2014. The department's 5-year plan also assumes no reduction in coal usage over the time period. So any cost and rate increases mentioned in our report do not remove the cost of removing coal from the DWP's portfolio. We then applied a number of sensitivities to the department's plan to understand how real-world conditions, such as the changes in commodity prices or outage and baseload units, could impact the department's financial results. We also looked at the impact of various carbon regimes which could be imposed along the state of California. From this analysis, we have concluded that the cost increases foreseen by the department are very likely to come to pass. These increases are driven both by market forces and recent commitments to increase renewable energy production, as well as improve energy efficiency. If the existing 0.1 cent per quarter ECAF cap is left in place, these additional costs will result in a deterioration of the department's financial condition and most likely a downgrade in the department's credit rating. This in turn will create additional interest costs and potentially lead to further downgrades or financial distress. It's also possible if some of the adverse market conditions that we talked about came into place that it could lead to a further deterioration and severe financial distress for the department. To avoid this situation, an increase of up to 2.7 cents per kilowatt hour will be required over the next 4 quarters, beginning with an increase of 0.8 cents per kilowatt hour as soon as possible. 0.8 cents represents an increase of approximately 6% in current bills, while 2.7 cents will represent an increase of over 20%. Our specific recommendations are, first, the Council, if it agrees, should grant an immediate increase in the ECAF rate of 0.8 cents per kilowatt hour for most customers, which is a 6% increase in rates for most customers. Second, and equally important, the current ECAF should be unbundled into multiple elements, separating short-term market-driven elements from predictable costs associated with longer-term commitments. This will dramatically increase transparency and allow the Council and ratepayers to fully understand the cost of commitments being made under the Department's RPS and energy efficiency programs, separating those costs from other market-based factors that may cause rates to go up or down. This unbundling should be carefully designed to ensure changes are revenue neutral, promote transparency, and comply with all Department legal and accounting obligations. We believe that getting this right is critical, not only for managing the current commitments of reaching 20%, but for understanding and managing the cost of any additional commitments in the future for either higher renewable usage or lower coal usage. Further increases in the ECAF rate components should be subject to the successful completion of this unbundling. Finally, the goals of the Department's rate restructuring proposal need to be further evaluated. The restructure would have a very significant impact on Tier 2 and Tier 3 customers and does not address many of the issues raised by Council members concerned with an ECAF increase, particularly on commercial and industrial customers and whether or not they can continue to do business in the City of Los Angeles. The goals of a base rate restructuring should be considered as part of a full review of the Department's rates, including both the ECAF restructuring and any required updates to base rates. In the following slides, we walk through some of what we believe are the key factors supporting our findings. On page 6, very briefly, what is ECAF? ECAF, as it's currently composed, is made up of fuel, which includes all the costs associated with natural gas, coal, and nuclear fuel procurement. It also includes emissions and retirement costs. Yeah, I'm on.
That was page 4.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll let these guys give you the page numbers. Mine are slightly different.
Yeah.
Purchase power. So all of the purchase power costs, including transmission and short-term energy market purchases, as well as long-term PPAs. RPS, so all of the costs associated with renewable resource energy capacity, O&M, depreciation, and interest for generation and transmission. Basically, all renewable projects are in the ECAF. Demand-side management, also sometimes referred to as energy efficiency programs. The cost side, which includes materials, incentive payments, audit costs, and administrative costs. And then the revenue side of the same programs. So cumulative annual energy savings under the DSM program multiplied by a factor that's set by ordinance representing loss-based rate revenue. And finally, the city transfer, the portion that is an amount equal to the city transfer percentage multiplied by the sum of all ECAF elements. And just to be clear, the PA recommendation is that all that would remain in ECAF are the top two, so fuel and purchase power. Purchase power not related to renewables. DWP, in its current findings, projects the ECAF cost increase to be over $500 million between 2009 and 2011. The major cost drivers of that are the renewable program. So new projects built to meet the 20% RPS are more expensive than the power it's displacing, so more expensive than primarily natural gas, which is what it's primarily displacing. DSM spending on energy efficiency is projected to more than double in 2011. Coal The current coal contracts are expiring at both Navajo and IPP, and costs are expected by both the department and we would concur are likely to increase. And natural gas, excuse me. While gas use is expected to decrease because it's offset by higher renewables, prices are expected to rebound from current low levels. The two primary drivers of increases going forward are RPS and DSM, both of which are growing dramatically when you take aside the fuel costs. I'm going to skip the next page unless there's questions on it, but it breaks down element by element what's driving the costs.
Mm-hmm.
So under the department's plan to maintain the current cash requirements to meet their bond rating, their original proposal was for a 2 cent per kilowatt hour spread over 4 quarters. We believe that when you apply real-world conditions, it's closer to 2 cents if you leave the ECAF alone as it's currently constructed. That would change if you deconstitute the ECAF in some ways. Most of this increase is market-driven or associated with existing contractual commitments. So the vast majority of the contracts to get to 20%, with several notable exceptions, have already been entered into. There are, however, some opportunities to decrease these costs going forward. You can freeze RPS at the current levels, which could save you approximately $60 million a year. And you could also freeze DSM spending at 2010 levels, which would also save you approximately $60 million a year. That would result in a 19% RPS penetration in 2010, 15% by fiscal year 2014. The reason it declines is there's short-term purchase power agreements for renewables that roll out, so it would actually decline if the other ones that are pending don't come in. We believe that if the rates are not increased, DWP will not be able to meet its target financial ratios.
Okay, go through that very carefully.
Okay.
Okay?
I will. So a total increase of between 2 and 2.7 over the next 4 quarters under the current ECAF structure and the current plans, we believe is necessary to maintain the DWP rating. And that's, just to be clear, so the additional rates don't retire the under collection as it currently exists today. To do that would require a higher rate increase. What they do is they make sure the department can meet its coverage ratios, which are an essential part of bond rating. So how much cash it has above its debt service, basically. And we modeled that under a variety of scenarios. So the department's plan, current plan, assumes natural gas prices stay within its forecast, coal prices stay within, there's no major outages. We would describe it as their plan is nothing goes wrong. So when you're doing scenarios and when you're doing financial modeling, it's always wise to predict that something will go wrong. And that's what PA did. We applied higher gas prices, higher coal prices, forced outages, carbon regimes, all of those different things, and then looked at sort of a likely set of outcomes. And based on that, we came to the conclusion that the 2 cents wouldn't get you to where you needed to be to maintain them, particularly given that the department's current accounting practices treat the city transfer payment as off-balance sheet and treat how it holds assets as off-balance sheet. So if you factor those things in, they'd be below their requirements. If they're downgraded, we've estimated that it will result in an additional $40 to $70 million a year in additional interest costs. But the impact is actually greater than that, because it will, one, that $70 million increases the under collection, which exacerbates the problem. And as the city's well aware, it sets in motion a whole other set of events that once they start, you can't really control.
Okay, and then I want to go back over this. This is page 8 in our book. Go back over this extensively,
Okay.
Paragraph by paragraph, because I think this is really very seminal or very pivotal in the discussion.
The initial rate increase of 0.8 cents per kilowatt hour would amount to a 6% bill increase. If the full 2.7 cents is enacted, the total bill increase could be as much as 20%. Average monthly residential costs would initially increase by $4 a month, with the possibility of further increasing a total of $14 a month.
And go over that range one more time.
So for the 0.8 cents, it's 6%, and those are monthly. And I realize the department's bills are bi-monthly, so you could double that for when they actually get their bill. If the full 2.7 is enacted over a 12-month period, it's approximately 20%, and that's very close with Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. It varies very slightly, but it's close to 20%, and that's approximately $14 a month. General service customers would experience similar percentage increases with higher dollar impacts due to their higher energy usage.
That's an assumption of a higher energy usage.
No, they have higher energy use.
Okay.
That's how they become general service
These
customers.
are the commercial and industrial
Okay,
customers.
Right, because, okay, great.
And they tend to get a different rate than the residential customer,
Yes.
right?
Right. Okay,
Any rate increases, this is PA's recommendation. Any rate increase beyond the initial 0.8 cents per kilowatt hour, we believe should be conditioned upon the successful unbundling of the ECAF into separate components. This will provide transparency into the key cost drivers, and I'll talk just for a second about what I mean by transparency. Right now, the ECAF is a bundle of things, as we've discussed. Its original intent was to be an account that accounted for uncontrollable market conditions. All the investor-owned utilities and many of the municipal-owned utilities across the United States have accounts like that, but they stop at fuel and purchase power. The department's ECAF over the years has become a catch-all for many things, including demand-side management, energy efficiency, renewable programs, the transfer fee, and at various times other components. So that when you're asked to approve a rate increase, it becomes difficult to know which portion is directly tied to whether it's RPS or renewables, because what you're looking at is one bucket, and so all the sand is mixed together in that bucket. We believe that each of the key components should have its own bucket. So you know how much sand is in it. When you want to increase the amount of sand, you know how much the cost of doing that is. We believe the commodity portion, that which is truly subject to market forces, should be uncapped, because uncapping it protects the department and the city from adverse financial impacts, such as what happened to PG&E in the energy crisis a few years ago, where they had to declare bankruptcy. They had to declare bankruptcy because they couldn't cover basically rising commodity and rising purchase power. That can be carefully controlled and carefully monitored. You can do a reasonableness review. You can check quarterly. So there's a great deal of transparency in that. We believe the RPS should have its own separate account and its own separate charge, so that each time new projects are added, you know the exact rate impact of that, and you're able to manage that. The same with DSM. DSM and RPS are very discretionary programs. So you can increase RPS and DSM, and you can decrease it. And we believe that having transparency into the cost drivers and the revenue benefits of each of those programs is essential. The city transfer component, we should be removed from the ECAF altogether and either fixed as a separate fee or tied to more stable base rate revenues. And that would also true up the accounting so that it would be dealt with as basically a fixed debt payment, which is how the rating agencies really view it anyway.
and as a fixed debt payment, that shows more stability, more certainty
Yeah, I mean, we believe you could also,
to the bond rating agencies?
yes. There are multiple choices regarding how ECAF is restructured. And you can shift portions to base rates. You can have separate line items on the bill. Debt service and O&M components of long-term non-RPS PPAs could be capped or moved to base rates. It's not simple, but we do believe that you could actually agree on the restructuring of the ECAF in approximately 3 months. We think there's mechanics, and then in terms of how you move money, and I realize the department has financial closing issues and all of that. So you may move the money over a slower period of time to account for accounting, but I think the basic agreements of how ECAF would look can be done relatively quickly, within 90 days, we believe. I'm just going to talk very briefly about the proposed changes that the department had on how residential rates would change. The original residential rate design was proposed with two goals in mind: to reduce the impact of ECAF on Tier 1 users, which includes the majority of low-income and Lifeline customers, and to encourage conservation by increasing the price differential between Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Our review of the department's redesign concluded that the design may have been successful in meeting those stated goals. It's close to revenue neutral, the magnitude of the Tier 1 rate increase due to ECAF is mitigated, and spreads between Tier 1 and other tiers approach the spreads in rate structures at other investor-owned utilities. However, as rate making is public policy, we believe these goals should be clearly articulated and reviewed in a participative process prior to any rate restructuring. I guess the short way of saying that is the department met the goals that it originally offered. We're not sure those are the right goals.
And participatory, participative process, what does that mean in your opinion?
So I think one of the things is we've met with most of the city council member offices now, and it was very clear in that there was a wide divergence of opinion on what were the right policy goals, how you protected the city from the impacts of what could be really severe economic impacts on commercial and industrial users. In other words, prevent more business flight, whether or not there should be subsidization, and if so, which classes should get it. And I would say, so that was one set of are these the right policy goals? Also, in meeting with neighborhood councils and other constituencies, I would say it's unclear as to whether or not their voices have been fully heard in this process. So I think, one, a review of the policy goals themselves, and then two, more time for people to participate and comment, we think is in order.
Okay. Let me begin, if you're done with your overall presentation. Let's just dig into this a lot deeper. Just to set the stage, you think you've outlined the scope of your review and the depth to which you pursued it, but I need to ask you some questions, some very basic questions. Do you think the Department of Water and Power provided you with necessary access to information that you needed to be successful in completing this review?
Absolutely, yes.
All right, and then there seems to be some confusion, particularly in the print media in terms of presenting this, as to what you're actually recommending. So if you could just give us a synopsis again. Are you in fact recommending a 2.7 per kilowatt increase over 4 quarters, or is it actually a 0.8 per kilowatt by April 1st, and then reevaluation of ECAF objectives?
So our recommendation is 0.8 by as soon as possible. So if that's April 1st, is as soon as possible, then yes. And that the balance of the 2.7 cents would really be subject to a restructuring of the ECAF and a review of the rate design. And when you restructure the ECAF, you may not need the full 2.7 cents for several reasons. One, as you restructure the ECAF and you pull DSM and RPS out, the council and the department would have the opportunity to review each of those components and make sure they're comfortable with the expenditure levels. Also, commodity prices fluctuate. If only the commodity portion is left in ECAF, right now, based on current natural gas prices, there is a decent chance that ratepayers could actually see a reduction in that portion of the rates. So that would also lessen it. So 2.7 is if everything stayed the same, if you didn't reconstitute ECAF and if you didn't take any further actions. Our recommendation is 0.8 as soon as possible and reconstitute the ECAF.
Now, a key component of your recommendation is that it should address the concerns of the bond rating agencies, and I'm looking back here on page 8 of the written report, and I want you to go through that again, starting with the potential for downgrade of the DWP's credit rating. You know we're going through a budget crisis here in the city, and so we discuss these issues a great deal, and I'd like for you to outline the thresholds that the department would have to manifest in order to trigger a downgrade of the bond rating, so that we know what we're up against, what we have to look for, and what those lines are that we can or cannot cross.
Okay. I'm going to ask Mark Hagan, who worked on this directly, to answer so you get the fullest answer.
Great.
Mark. Sure.
I guess I would start by saying we looked at the levels of key ratios that are required to maintain a AA bond rating. And in looking at DWP's peers, so AA-rated municipal utilities of a substantial size, we found a median of about 2.30 for the debt coverage ratio. DWP in their own evaluation has come up with a target of 2.25, and they have received advice from their financial advisors that that would be an appropriate level to maintain. If companies fall below their target debt service coverage ratio, there has been recent history in California that ratings agencies will respond quickly to downgrade or to put a negative outlook on the ratings of those utilities. So recently there were 3 examples. One was with Anaheim Utility, one was with the Imperial Irrigation District, and the other with City of Modesto, where those utilities basically broke through their target ratios and were quickly then, after it was clear that appropriate rate relief was not coming to those utilities, were put on watch or downgraded by ratings agencies. So given those, and those are all recent examples.
And that, was some of that failure to get rate relief manifested through a lack of political support or manifestation that there was not support for meeting their financial targets?
In each case, there was an action or lack of action taken to approve a rate increase.
What about dissension?
I don't think we've looked at that.
Okay.
I think the graph at the bottom, just to explain a little bit.
Yeah.
So if you take the department's reference case, which is the blue line,
right,
and you see that in 2000, and so this is if they are basically still at the 0.1 cent quarterly cap that's in effect today. You see they get down to about 1.6, 1.7, which would be significantly below. And we believe it could be even more below that if you apply more stringent accounting standards. If you apply what we consider the stress case, which we think is a very real-world market case, they're getting close to 1, which would definitely result in a downgrade, we believe.
Okay.
And then the green line shows you sort of where you are with the 0.8 cent increase.
All right, well then in the report you reference that DWP management rate makers would need to demonstrate support for meeting these financial targets. So explain in greater detail what you mean by that.
I believe what we mean is that there has to be agreement upon DWP's management that it is going to, these are the standards and the requirements that they're going to meet, and that they're going to manage their operations to meet those, which would mean that they'd operate as any business.
Okay, well then let me ask you this, because I've been asking back as far as last fall for the department's plan for reducing their operating costs, and to date we have not received anything. And as you know, we're going through a budget crisis, and all the departments across the board are taking cuts, taking furloughs, pay reductions, all that sort of thing, and yet we don't have anything like that coming out of the Department of Water and Power yet. Kind of baffles me as to why, but I don't want to get bogged down in that right now. But I guess what I'd like to know from you is how can management within the Department of Water and Power achieve a plan with some logical outcomes before they have taken a look to streamlining their own operation, because I'm making an assumption here that after streamlining its own operation, it might result in a potential lower request for the need for an energy cost adjustment factor. Basically, when you've adjusted everything in your own home, cleaned your own house, straightened everything out, it might show, clearly it would demonstrate to the ratepayers we're doing every possible thing that we can to make sure that we've turned over every stone within our own agency to be more efficient and to mitigate the need for an ECAF at its highest range to try to translate that into further savings. Now, in doing your research or gathering your information, did you ever determine or locate any kind of strategy within the department that showed that they were attempting to do that? Because I haven't seen that yet, and I've asked for it quite a while ago, and I'm wondering if that was something that you were able to gather.
So I give you a somewhat complicated question, so I'll give you a multi-part answer. So the majority of labor costs and direct costs are in base rates, and the department is working on its new base rate proposal, which I believe will be coming before council sometime this spring or in early summer. That's probably the most appropriate forum to deal with the vast majority of costs, because that's where most of the labor costs are. So that's an opportunity to look at program costs, labor costs, very, very directly.
But by then, we would have lost our leverage to compel them to do anything.
You'll have new leverage on base rates, but if the question is there an opportunity to make significant reductions in the ECAF proposal, in the components that are in ECAF, we believe the answer is yes. Not without some difficult decisions, but difficult financial times require difficult decisions.
Well, the hard part about that is that then you get sucked deeper into the mud that you're already in. And we have a really interesting opportunity here now because we haven't crossed the threshold over into this yet. And we do have an enormous amount of leverage as a policy-making body. And with external interest, engagement, and also, quite frankly, pressure from people who are ratepayers to force us to make sure that we're diligent in reviewing this. Now, one of the key benefits, I think, of reevaluating the ECAP objectives and breaking it up into its different pieces, the transfer, the ECAF, the carbon surcharge, is because I think you educate people even more and you gain an extra measure of transparency. And I want to know if you, as an analyst on this, would agree with that practice, and if that differs from previous practices.
I absolutely agree. I believe, in focusing for a moment on RPS and DSM, or energy efficiency, I think if you separate out those two components, you gain an enormous amount of transparency into exactly what those costs are. They're no longer jumbled and confused. And because they're largely discretionary programs, you can then fine-tune them. And if you were to make, for example, a policy decision where you said, we may get to 20% a little bit more slowly, or we may get there a different way, and you froze RPS expenditures at the current levels, you could save approximately $60 million a year based up from where the department is currently proposed. We believe there are similar opportunities in DSM, so by breaking it out, you may well be able to reduce the total impact of an ECAF increase as it's currently projected. If you leave it the way it is, it's almost impossible to do that.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm seeking, and I think the public would seek greater transparency as it relates to the RPS agreements and costs and the energy efficiency programs. And I think we don't know a lot about the expenditures in those areas because the funding stream has been buried within the ECAF. And I don't know whether that's accurate or what you think, but what do you think?
I would agree with the sentiment of what you're saying. I think the ECAF makes it difficult to know exactly where dollars flow. So I think making it more transparent, making it more discrete line items benefits everyone. I don't believe there's any logical reason to leave the ECAF the way it is.
Okay, and let me give you one more scenario. And this is one that really it's very disturbing because over the past few years, the department has urged the council to approve a number of renewable projects. And in fact, they did inform this committee that necessary funding was in place in each case. And the ECAF was already budgeted for the programs. And so we'd been told prior that there would not be a need for an ECAF increase above the existing cap. And now here we are again. So, when you talk about maybe rolling past April the 1st and making adjustments down the road, that makes me pretty nervous. What do you think has happened in the past in terms of the department's practices, and how do we fix this so it doesn't continue to happen?
I'll deal with the second part because it's easier.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I think following the recommendations of how to treat ECAF and having the city council then focus on each particular project as it's brought before them, or each particular sort of DSM enhancement or change will help an enormous amount. I think having a rate analysis provided to you by the department for each project. So you'll actually see if there is a new 500 megawatt wind project, its impact on the carbon surcharge, if that's what it's going to be called, would be very, very clear. You'll then be able to tell, as that project goes online and actually operates, you'll be able to see if it performed. Did the department or its vendors build it for what they said they would build it? Are they operating it for what they said they would operate it? Is it performing the way it was supposed to? It becomes very clear you're not in a great big huge murky package anymore. I think that would actually do it. Why this happened in the past, I would only be speculating, and it's probably not fair to do that.
Okay, that's fair enough. What do you think the fiscal viability is of uncapping a true fuel-based ECAF? And do you think ratepayers would actually see savings or lower rates if fuel prices actually drop?
If it had been done over the past few years, the dramatic decrease in natural gas prices certainly would have benefited ratepayers, absolutely. That would have been somewhat offset by coal prices, but if it had been uncapped over the last few years, I think they would have absolutely seen rate decreases. I think it's best practice across the United States. I think it's how almost every investor-owned utility and large municipal does it, and largely it protects the city and protects the ratepayers and protects the department from the type of calamity that was experienced in California during the energy crisis. I think it's sound management. It's in everyone's interest. Will there be times when rates rise? Sure, but those type of things will sort of revert back to the mean. So there'll be times when everybody's really happily surprised their bill went down. There'll be times when their bill goes up, but over balance it'll be relatively consistent. And the department can also manage it by hedging. Using sophisticated hedging programs, you can even more minimize that fluctuation.
Okay, so based on your research, shed some light on the $130 million undercollection within the ECAF related to fuel prices, and then give me your analysis as to how that occurred.
Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about the history of that?
Sure. The current undercollection of $130 million is a combination of many costs. So natural gas, coal, renewable programs are all in the current ECAF, as we showed in the presentation. The volatility that caused the undercollection we see today was largely driven by natural gas, in our opinion, and this was because in 2008 there was a substantial run-up in natural gas prices, which have since come down, and that caused the undercollection to grow because the ECAF was capped. And now the undercollection has actually gotten smaller over the last year since natural gas prices have come back down. But because the ECAF is also bundled up with RPS programs and coal and energy efficiency, those also have had some contribution. As RPS has grown, that has contributed to the undercollection as well. It's hard to separate them out because they're all bundled together. But if we had to pick out one specific factor that drove the current undercollection, it would have been the spike in natural gas prices in 2008.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, given the department's RPS objectives, even if we achieve 20% or beyond, would we still end up being somewhat reliant on coal?
I think you'll be, under the department's current plans, there is no displacement of coal. So increasing.
Okay, say that again, just for the record, so everybody can hear that.
Under the department's current 5-year plan, which is the focus of this report, so that gets you to 2014, there are no current plans to reduce the amount of coal power that's generated by the department.
And the basis of that is?
The department's current plans.
Because in order to maintain their margins? So coal power is, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your point of view, the cheapest source of power available to the department currently.
And so more than 40% of their power is generated by coal. So their current 5-year plan is really economically driven in that to change that mix, to displace coal, would cause an even larger rate increase. So the renewable resources that are coming on in the next 5 years are primarily displacing natural gas resources. So natural gas, while it's cleaner than coal, is in this particular case, the economics favor coal.
Okay.
And I realize that's different than some of the public statements, but from all of the plans we've seen, unless something has changed, that's the plan.
And then how does that differ from are you talking about public statements made by the department?
No, I'm just referring to things that have been in the press over the last few days that talked about significant displacement of coal and things like that. We haven't seen anything in the plans in the near term. And again, I'm stressing this is till 2014, that there's any indication that significant amounts of coal will be displaced.
And again, because coal is more affordable, or more affordable than natural gas.
And the department has long-term coal contracts and base load resources that are coal-powered.
Okay. What the impact on low-income and Lifeline customers, if we pursue your analysis and go to 2.7 kilowatt, how do you shield that category of customer from an increase? Can you shield them?
So I think the first answer is don't approve the 2.7 all at once. Do the 0.8, unbundle the ECAF, re-look at the proposed rate treatment. It's really a bundle of doing all those three things, because you may not need to get to 2.7 as we've talked about. I think dealing with the immediate financial needs of the department as soon as possible makes sense. It's the right thing to do. Allowing more time to work through these other issues is also, I think, the right thing to do to protect the ratepayers and the citizens, so that you can unbundle and examine and look at the policy implications of different rate proposals.
In the future, do you think there are ways that we can taper off some of the cost impact to ratepayers through the development of an integrated resources plan? I know your report mentions the development of an IRP, and I just wanted to ask you to talk about that a bit more on the record.
We think having a really detailed and well-thought-out integrated resource plan is essential for an agency like the department or an investor-owned utility. Running a large power and water utility requires lots of choices. There are a lot of contractual options. There is the should I own it, should I contract for it. Department right now has a we should own it philosophy. In our report, we think that's something that should be re-looked at on a project-by-project basis. We absolutely believe that an IRP, if well executed, could result in significant cost savings.
And do you think an IRP presents an opportunity for a participatory process?
Yeah,
the development of the IRP?
Well, something I've learned is that anything involving the department can become a participatory process. And so I think that certainly could happen. You would definitely have the opportunity to comment, and it could be reviewed by external parties. I think the absence of it, unfortunately opens the department up to criticism.
Yeah. Okay, one last question, and I'll go to my colleagues. I just wanted you to reiterate the demand-side management and renewable portfolio standard savings if we do nothing.
So nothing isn't really the right way. If you hold constant at the 2010 budget levels, I'll take DSM first. So 2009, I believe, was the highest expenditure level in the department's history for DSM. 2010 is almost at the same level. It is slightly below it, but very, very close. So if you froze it, the department would still have a very robust demand-side management program on par with the best in its history. But by freezing it, you would avoid approximately $60 million a year in additional costs. You could say, I'll do that for a year, I'll do that for 2 years, whatever it takes to sort of get you to a place that would help. in terms of rate relief, as well as still having a robust DSM program. RPS, if you froze at 2010 levels, you'd get very close to 20% this year. I think you'll be around 19%. And as I mentioned, that will decline to around 15% by 2014 if you did nothing else because of short-term contracts rolling out. But you have time. You have 4 years to do something else. You could enter into new contracts. You could tweak the existing portfolio and perhaps increase the output of it, but not at as much cost. So we don't believe you have a bad RPS program or a bad DSM program if you freeze at current levels. So it's not doing nothing. You're still doing a lot. You're still a leader in the nation in terms of what you're doing, but you are scaling back.
Okay. Mr. Krikorian, would you like to go next?
You can come back.
All right, great. Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions and comments. I almost don't know where to start. There's so much information that we just got. Probably the item that's the most important to me is I hate both at the utility level and at the city level expending money for nothing or losing money for no purpose. And I think since we're trying to protect the ratepayers, the last thing we want to do is see millions of dollars go out for literally nothing, which would be what would happen if we got a downgrade. What's the most ratepayer-friendly scenario to move forward with an almost ironclad guarantee that we don't get a downgrade?
So,
because we're talking about tens of millions of dollars for nothing.
I mean, we believe what we recommended gets you there for a few reasons. So one, I'm going to deal with having the ECAF only be constituted with the market controllable pieces. So the rating agencies are well aware of the risk that the department has of having a capped ECAF and being subject to the will of the market. So it realizes that the department can't recover without a somewhat lengthy political process, rapid fluctuations. So uncapping the commodity portion and having that be the ECAF would go a long way to convincing the rating agencies and the financial community in general that the department has the flexibility to deal with totally unplanned and uncontrollable market events. That's a big factor that you can do without raising rates. If you grant the 0.8 cents, now that's what we believe over the next, that if you uncap ECAF, you take all the steps, 0.8, and then perhaps potentially another 0.8 will go a long way towards maintaining it. And then if all the other actions roll in, who knows, you may not have to go too much further. So
Now, the first 0.8, how long would that last where it would satisfy rating agencies?
Depends on what happens with commodity prices, depends on the other actions that you take. But let's say the 0.8 lasts at least a quarter and potentially 6 months.
So, and I agree, I think this is the most obvious thing we have to do because everything else is somewhat discretionary, but your fuel costs are your fuel costs. So there's no logical way to have higher fuel costs come to to DWP and not pay those out. We're sort of putting ourselves in the same position that some of the other utilities were when they almost went bankrupt during the energy shortage, where we capped how much they could charge, and then the rates were absolutely skyrocketing in terms of what they were paying. So we almost were guaranteeing their bankruptcy. So I think that makes total sense to uncap that and then add some sort of an increase. And I think it probably makes sense to make it the most minimal increase we can get away with at a time. So I would think that the 0.8 cents rather than approving the whole 2.7 would make sense. Do we have a reason to approve the whole 2.7 in concept, or could we just do it piece by piece?
I guess the only reason that I would do the whole 2.7 is if you never wanted to hear about this again. But even that wouldn't work because chances are you'd be hearing about it again. So I can't think of. I don't think right now it would be the fiscally responsible thing to do to approve the whole 2.7. I think doing it in pieces And Councilmember Perry talked about maintaining leverage. I think by doing it in pieces and having the additional actions being required of the department, you maintain or increase your leverage to make sure that the department acts in a timely manner to reconstitute ECAF, to come up with new rate proposals, to look at additional cost-saving opportunities. All of those things, I think, become much more predictable if you do this in pieces.
Now, how do we compare with other cities' residential and commercial rates compared to where we'd be if we implemented the whole 2.7% increase?
So I'll give you an example, and we have a chart and a thing that we can turn to. If the full 2.7 is enacted, you're going to be roughly on par with Edison's rates overall, and you're approaching the other investor-owned utilities. So the lower cost advantage that the department had for a significant period of time erodes under sort of all utilities' current rate structures. Their rates may increase going forward, right? So, but today, if you implement this, you're going to be about at the same level as Southern California Edison customers.
So even though people feel the rate increase and think, rightly so, that our rates are skyrocketing, they're not skyrocketing past other places. They're reaching comparability with other places.
You're catching up.
How about the renewable piece of all this? I mean, I'm, as people know me, as gung-ho an environmentalist as anybody, but at the same time, during the next 2 or 3 years where our finances are pretty terrible, I'm not going to be pushing for us to do too much more than we have to. How discretionary is our renewable portfolio? Where are we compared to state requirements to achieve renewability?
John,
the department is not
Name for the
under.
record. Just
Excuse
say your
me?
name for the
Oh, I'm sorry, Jonathan Jacobs. The department's not under the same sort of state requirement that the investor-owned utilities are, but the department has committed to achieve 20% by this year or shortly thereafter. The other utilities are around the same position that the department is now. Last year, for example, Southern California Edison had approximately 17% qualifying renewables. Pacific Gas and Electric had 14.2%. San Diego Gas and Electric had 10.8%, and the department at 14% was right in the middle. The department will probably be a little ahead of the other utilities, be a little ahead of those 3 utilities this year. They are currently planning to achieve the 20% target a little bit more slowly because they've had farther to go.
Now, if we decided to cut back to help out the ratepayers and not expend the full $60 million, where would that place us?
Well, as Andrew mentioned, that would place you, if you did nothing else, towards the end of this projection horizon, around 15%, maybe a little bit less. The other utilities may then have surpassed you under their current plans. But again, a lot of talking about where you're going to be in 2 or 3 years, or where anyone's going to be in 2 or 3 years, is reliant on the ability of various parties to actually build their plants and deliver energy. So right now, it's you can make plans and estimate what it's going to cost. You can't be certain where they're going to be.
And I think, so if you say that you're at 15% in 2014, if you say we stop today, we don't move ahead with there are several projects pending approval. The department is waiting, I think, to see what happens with this. So those don't go forward. But you also have the opportunity to pull various levers and do things. So 15% might become 17%, but not at the same cost. The department has done a laudable job in getting to the 20% this year. So that means you could develop an alternate plan that may get you close to 20% by the end of the study period, but in a different way.
Now, what about operating costs? I'm still trying to figure out where that actually fits in. Do we have a strategic plan to reduce operating costs? Did you study that carefully as part of this, or was that not an area of as much focus.
So there are not a great deal of labor costs except for those associated with the RPS program in the ECAF itself. Most of those are in base rates. And I think, I know the department is working to prepare their next base rate application that will come before the City Council. I haven't seen that, so I can't tell you what the focus is in terms of strategic cost reduction.
Yeah, neither have we.
Or
Okay.
not. And it wouldn't be fair for me to comment because they're
No,
still developing.
I mean, I told you, I asked back in the last November. Okay.
So you haven't been part of that process.
No, we have not.
And just to clarify, Councilman, that was actually out of scope of this particular contract, which is why they only focus on the ECAF component, not the base rate piece.
Right, I'm not blaming him for it, I'm just trying
No,
to
just to
clarify.
clarify.
Now, there's no coal replacements, so that where we do replace plants with renewables, we're maintaining the dirtiest of the plants.
That's correct.
How cost effective would it be, rather than looking at which new plants we build with more renewables, looking at a better choice of which ones we replace and moving the replacements to more to natural gas rather than coal? If we compared those two choices of building more renewables and making better use of the renewables we do build by.
Can you flip that so that people can see? So if you turn to the appendix, I believe it's page 19 in your handout. This gives you a little bit of clue about the magnitude of the issue. So if you look at the weighted average fuel cost, so these are weighted average costs. They're not the exact cost of an exact unit. For coal, it's roughly $20 per megawatt hour produced. Natural gas is almost 3 times as much, right? $58 per megawatt hour. So you can see, and when you get to renewables, a good sort of rule of thumb is roughly $100 per megawatt hour. So you get a sense for renewables are significantly more expensive resources. And granted, you can argue, well, a certain type of renewable will be a little cheaper, but on average, $100 an hour, megawatt hour is not a bad rule of thumb. So from 20 to almost 60 to 100. So the economics, because the department was such a heavily coal-driven enterprise in the past, the economics make it so difficult to move away from coal without really extreme rate shock. So it will take, a longer period of time to really eat into the coal. You'll need to have a bigger and bigger renewable base at lower and lower cost. Or you need the price of coal to jump up dramatically, which doesn't really help the ratepayer, just makes the comparison more friendly. So it's a difficult economic environmental conundrum.
Well, based on, if we were just looking at the amount of pollution that was generated, it would look as if, rather than building the renewables and going up to $100, if we just moved from natural gas to coal, it looks as if it would be considerably less expensive in terms of the amount of pollutants reduced, although it wouldn't get you to the renewable side.
No, I think because coal is so much dirtier, the amount of CO2 emissions that a coal plant produces, you don't want to move to more coal, particularly if there's any type of carbon regime enacted. What you want to do is find the most economical ways possible to retire your coal over a period of time. And I think when the department lays out a plan that goes beyond 20% and an integrated resource plan, you get an opportunity to see how they truly plan to move away from coal. And until you see that IRP, it's really, right now, it's bring renewables on to get to 20%. The generation gets displaced is natural gas, and it's difficult to move away from that without really changing the economics. But you wouldn't want to move towards more coal because the emissions
Right, you clearly wouldn't want to move towards more of it. I'm just wondering whether we've looked at what looks like we'd have greater savings if we move from coal to natural gas than we would by building the renewables.
Absolutely. Yeah. At current price levels, natural gas is a more cost-effective, but natural gas is not as clean as renewables. Renewables are basically, zero emissions or close to it.
Yeah. So, well, that's a hard question. Let's see. I think that's probably all for now. So,
Mr. Krikorian, did you have some questions you'd like to ask?
Yes, thank you. Just kind of to build on Mr. Kretz's questions a little bit, so that we're clear on this. Right now, there's absolutely no mandate on DWP to meet any renewable goal by any deadline. Is that right?
I believe that it is an obligation that the city has taken on.
Right. So the only mandate that DWP is facing that has any legal effect are AB 32 requirements for carbon reduction. Is that right?
We think so, yes.
Okay. So we can reduce our carbon footprint significantly, as Mr. Kretz has suggested, by simply going from coal to natural gas virtually immediately. Fair to say, other than the cost factor?
Other than the cost factor, yes.
Okay. Now,
yeah, I mean, you have to either have the gas plants or be able to contract with them. So
right.
Assuming they're there.
Right. For the longer term, there have been efforts in Sacramento to create legal requirements of renewable energy that would be enforceable against municipals, and the governor has taken steps in that regard as well. So I think it is probably safe to assume that some point in coming years we will be faced with renewable energy mandates that we need to start preparing for and planning for now, though. Fair?
Quite likely. Quite possible, I should say. Yeah.
Okay. In your analysis, did you make any comparison of different mixes of renewables and their likely impacts on long-term fluctuations in fuel costs, and also on any contribution that would have towards a need for an ECAF increase?
So what we looked at in that regards is we didn't look at what is the absolute optimal portfolio. We looked at the department's existing RPS resources and the ones that were likely to come on board. And what we did find was the department's done a good job of getting the right resources for this particular time. And by the right resources, it's heavily wind driven, and right now wind is the least cost renewable resource available.
Well, it's the least cost renewable to be purchased, but given that you have to back up 100% of the wind with another fuel supply, it isn't necessarily the best source of renewable energy for the dollar, given our demand curves, is it?
Actually, we think that right now it is, given your demand curves, given your transmission system, given your customer's load shape. So for example, how that load shape matches up with solar resources, all of those sort of things. We think the department's done a good job within the constraints it has. If they had to build more expensive transmission, for example, go further away, that would dramatically increase the cost. They minimize that. I think as their renewable portfolio grows or evolves over time, you can begin to more finely tune that so that you have a bigger blend, so that you can have solar resources that come on at a certain time, wind that come on at a certain time, all of those sort of things. But to get to 20% as quickly as possible, I think they probably did that in as effective way as they could from a resource mix perspective.
And they've also diversified the locations from which they take their wind energy, so that because of that diversification, they don't have to back it up one for one.
Can you ID yourself for the record? 'Cause
I'm sorry, Jonathan Jacobs again.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Do you mean diversification within the wind portfolio, or with wind, solar, and other kinds of renewables as well?
Thus far, primarily within the wind portfolio.
Okay.
So geographic diversification, really, right?
Okay.
Windy in different places.
Did you make any assumptions about the percentage of the renewable portfolio that would need to be utility owned as opposed to non-utility owned, and how that might impact on long-term costs?
So we took the department's plan, and the department's plan is that the majority of the resources would be department-owned. What we said in our report was that we believe that philosophy should be revisited. We think there are reasons for owning, there are reasons for contracting, and we think having a sort of black and white, we want to own all the resources thing may not be the most cost-effective way. So we think overall it should be revisited, and then on a project-by-project basis it should be looked at each time.
So given that the majority of the renewable portfolio is currently is utility owned and is anticipated to be then, building on Chairwoman Perry's point about other impacts on the ECAF costs, wouldn't it be true that the department's labor costs are a factor with regard to the renewables component because those are utility-owned resources?
They're a factor, but in this case they don't move the needle. The amount of labor associated with the renewables portfolio is immaterial. So I think if that continues to grow, that could change. But right now, it's not a huge cost driver. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mark Hagan. Just to clarify what Andrew just said, he was referring to the solar projects, or majority of those in the plan are planned to be utility owned. The existing wind projects are actually, to a large part, contracted, right, or have an option for DWP to own them. So I think that explains the discrepancy there.
I see.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay. There will be, but
yeah, it's
another
going to be
time.
a long process.
Thank you.
Can you get an extra chair up there? Because I wanted to get another speaker up there just to ask him a few quick questions. I don't know if he's still in the room because I'm kind of Jeff. Jeff Portola, CFO from the Department of Water and Power. Can you come up? I wanted to ask you a question on the record. He's okay. He's got a chair.
Yep,
okay. He's
I
good.
can
He's
move.
good. He's
Have
good.
my seat.
Okay, thanks. And again, just for the record, you are?
Jeff Pelto. I'm the CFO for DWP.
And I would like to ask you, and I've said this about way too many times, about the department's plan to reduce operating costs. As you know, I asked about this last winter or fall and haven't gotten anything yet. So tell me, has the department made any progress on developing a plan that they can bring back to the committee to demonstrate a reduction in their operating costs?
I think as we're going to be presenting on Thursday our ECAF proposal, and we've made a number of reductions.
And that's presented to where for the...
That will be presented to our Board of Water and Power Commissioners on Thursday. There's a number of operating reductions we've made and a number of capital reductions that we've made.
Can you talk about that in general terms now? Or?
In general terms, a lot of the proposal that I think that PA Consulting looked at is different than what was looked at by this committee and by the council under the 245 process. Mm-hmm. We've removed a number of projects. The original proposal that we had was up to about a 24% RPS. Now we're down to right at 20%. That's what these gentlemen looked at, was right at 20%. So that reduced our cost quite a bit. There's other things that we've had a renegotiated MOU that's in there that has reduced our cost compared to before. Those types of things, and we have it all laid out what those different things are. It's going to save us roughly about $240 million a year in comparison to the prior plan.
Okay, so savings of $245 a year. Now, have you extrapolated to the point where you can indicate to us at least that that has some beneficial effect towards the amount of ECAF that you would continue to seek or not?
When you look at the proposal that we are coming forward with and that they reviewed compared to what we had before, that is the $240 million a year. It's about 1 cent a kilowatt hour, which works out to about $240 million less in ECAF expenditures. So we've reduced it quite a bit. We've removed a number of projects. We've removed, I was recently in the press about Green Path, that's out. Talked about the transmission. We've gone through and reviewed all those different things as we've prepared to come back to our board with that proposal.
Okay, now, before we end today, I'd just like to ask the Chief Legislative Analyst, for the benefit of the public, to talk about the process where the board or the Department of Water and Power Commission will hear this. It's March 18th, am I correct, Jeff?
March 18th, correct,
Okay.
Thursday.
They will hear the matter on March 18th. And in order for the council to assert jurisdiction pursuant to Proposition 245, explain to the public what we have to do.
A motion is introduced by the council to assert jurisdiction. That motion is then scheduled for council consideration. If council adopts it, has sufficient votes for it, then the matter is then brought before the council. And then you have a 21-day window within which you either concur with the board's decision or disapprove of the decision. And if you disapprove, you could send it back with recommendations as to how to improve the proposal if you seek to do so.
Okay. So in effect, for the members of the public, it's almost like an appellate court process where we have a decision rendered by a commission, and then we can't necessarily take that decision and change it, but it will come before us. We will review it, we will analyze it, we react to it, and then we send back our recommendations and our reactions thereto back to the commission with the hopes that they will feel pressure one way or the other to revise their first position. Is that a fair paraphrase of what you said?
Yes, that's a fair assessment.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, did you have a question, Mr. Perez?
I had a question for you, actually,
Go ahead.
which is, are we going to make any recommendations to them before their hearing from what we've heard today?
I'm going to make a request of the Chief Legislative Analyst and the Chief Administrative Office. If you want, I'll make it now, and then you can see if you want to add to it.
Okay, that would be
Okay.
perfect.
So, and then to the clerk, I think there was another process issue with respect to the file and whether or not we could take an action on this today. If you put that on the record.
Well, basically what you have before you has not been transmitted to the city clerk as an official document addressed to the city council. Therefore, this document does not exist in terms of a council file number. It's also not available on our council file management system. However, when the board takes action on the matter, they will be transmitting a board report, which will then be given a file number, and that's what you use when you assert jurisdiction. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, actually, it does very well. And thank you for giving that answer, because I wanted to make it clear as to what action we could take today, or how we close off today. The way I perceive a Prop 245, and I don't necessarily consider it to be a hostile act, nor hostile or non-hostile, it's just an action for us as council members to participate in the policy-driven process and to reshape this proposal wherever necessary, or wherever council members feel it is necessary to react. So what I would like to do is to ask for a report back from PA, and in doing so, I'd like for you to work directly with the Chief Legislative Analyst's office and the Chief Administrative Officer's office on the alternatives, and we touched on them today, for DSM and RPS savings. I'd like you to be much more expansive on that. And I don't know how quickly it's realistic for you to come back, but is 2 weeks is that unrealistic?
I think, given the type of access we have to the department and their cooperation, that's probably realistic.
Okay. Then if we can work something out so that we can have this follow-up with this breakout on DSM and RPS, so we can examine that in much greater detail, because that's where the movement can occur. Because those are the areas where we have the greatest mobility in terms of discretionary action. And to Mr. Peltola, I look forward to seeing what report is put on the record on March the 18th before the commission, very specifically as it relates to the reduction in capital projects and operating costs. And again, I want to express my frustration in that I had asked, and it's not directed towards you, Mr. Peltola, but to the department in general, my utter frustration in making that request on the record in this committee and making it pretty clear that I was very serious about getting back a response, not ever getting that, still wondering why, other than I guess it was a decision internal to just ignore the request and just to take this back to the department. The one thing that we do have as council members is we have the public domain in which to conduct these discussions and to be relentless in pursuing that information. So I hope that you can share that with the commission because I think that this is a very pivotal and critical piece of our decision-making process as we approach doing a 245 to be able to shape a proposal if that is to take place. So with that, unless somebody, did you want to add anything to that, Mr. Koretz?
Well, my only question was whether we could give our 2 cents as an advisory to the commission on a couple of the items that we've heard. I think a very convincing case is made for unbundling the pieces of ECAF and removing the cap from just the commodities portion. I think we want the ability to look at all the discretionary pieces and tighten them up when appropriate. But I think the commodity part, it makes absolutely no sense to constrain the ability to pay what it actually costs for those commodities.
Well, a couple of things you can do. You're obviously free to go over there and speak on the record during the commission hearing. You could obviously put a letter on the record during the commission hearing, or as part of the deliberative process, commission has its presentation, makes its decision, then perhaps you'll join with other colleagues and assert jurisdiction so that we can have a very full-bodied discussion with all 15 members on the record. And so you do have a lot of options to be able to, I wouldn't say it's 2 cents, it's more than 2 cents.
My question, though, is, and I think that's a good idea, I should at least send my own letter outlining my thoughts on it.
Right.
But do we have the ability, both from a legal standpoint in terms of noticing and just in general, to provide that advice to them as a committee?
Well, the way that we have impact on the committee from a procedural standpoint is by asserting jurisdiction and again affirming or denying, but basically it sends their action back with our comment on the record as to how to revise or change the proposal. And Mr. CLA, if you could amend that.
We have a reactionary role via the charter with regard to what the board does. We can't set rates. They determine the rates, and then based on how they determine them, we either up or down them. I mean, that's basically how we respond.
So you think the most appropriate way in terms of trying to influence their actions beforehand is just to provide our own individual input on
I think
the
that's
issues?
fine. I mean, I think it's fine. I have to be honest with you, and this is just us talking in front of 50 other people, and God knows who else is listening. But I think it's fine for you to do that. I don't expect them to pay it any attention. I don't see a record or a pattern of practice of them really listening to what we ask without having us basically, bend them over a barrel.
Fair enough. Well,
Okay.
I'm new to that part of the process, so I don't have any track record with them.
No, that's okay. You'll learn. But it's fine. It's fine. I mean, I think it's great if you want to do that, and that's what getting new people in, it's fresh blood, new perspectives, and I think that's great. You're not jaded.
I may be soon, though.
You might be. Maybe you look by Thursday. Who knows? All right. So let's go. Yeah, Mr.
Yeah, thank you. If I may, I agree wholly with your suggested course of action. The one thing I would ask is that if we're going to look at further analysis of the DSM and the RPS as part of, would be helpful for me anyway. I don't know if anybody else would be interested, but as part of the DSM analysis, we've looked at its impacts on affirmative expenditures for the DSM as well as reduced revenues. But I'm not sure if I have a handle on the long-term savings of deferred capital investment and so on that come with reduced demand. I don't know if that's figured into your analysis or not. Has it been to date?
Yeah, I think we can look at that in the time frame.
And,
Okay, great.
Jeff, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I could speak to that a little bit. On the DSM, just council member, the big programs for that is we've had Small Business Direct install. We go in and retrofit all the lighting for the small businesses, and that does help us on the distribution infrastructure side. We also do low-income refrigerator exchange. We have a very aggressive commercial lighting program. All of that does help us, and when you look at our financial plan that will be presented on Thursday, it shows the reduction on that.
Good. That's where I was going, because I know there have been a number of very successful programs, but the question is, as a matter of financial analysis, comparing the affirmative costs,
Right.
the loss of revenues, and the long-term capital savings. I think you have to have all three of those components
Right.
to make
And one
sense.
thing I'd just like to say wasn't mentioned, and I know that PA knows it, our DSM program is by far the most cost-effective when you look at that versus the RPS. It's at roughly 2.5 cents, and Andrew was talking about 10 cents. So it really is the best thing you can do. It helps our customers. It keeps overall cost down. So it's one of the best programs we can have.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we'll get our report back in 2 weeks on the alternatives for DSM and RPS, and it will also provide us with time to deal with your presentation on Thursday before the commission, and then we will act accordingly with what our process alternatives are.
As a side note, before we adjourn, there are several people who expressed interest in the proceedings of this committee. Granicus, which is what I'm staffing right now, will be available after we adjourn. It gets downloaded within the hour. Anybody who's interested in hearing to basically the whole hearing can go back on their computer and access via lacity.org on audio on demand.
Audio on demand. All right. Did everybody hear that? Audio on demand, lacity.org? Okay.
And I'm sorry,
Yes.
will the entire report also be available to the public?
The report has not been received officially by the clerk, so it is not available to the public. It will be available once the board transmittal is received.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your patience and your attention. This is a very complicated subject. Appreciate it. I hope to see all of you here in 2 weeks, and keep your eye on what we'll be doing in council after the commission hearing on the 18th of March. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.